Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Welcome to Spilling the Tea on HR Tech, where we focus on the hottest HR tech news everyone needs to know to be in the know. We break down the news of the week and help you make sense of what it means for our industry and how it can impact your organization. We're recording today on July 17th, 2026. A couple days after my birthday, so it's always nice. So thank you to everyone online who said thank you, happy birthday to me. I really appreciate it. Both Facebook and LinkedIn, which is nice. And we bring you all the news you can use this week. I'm your host, Stacey Harris, Chief Research Officer and Managing Partner for Sapient Insights Group. We are a research and advisory firm if you haven't worked with us previously. And joining me today in this conversation is my co-host, Cliff Stevenson, Director of Research and Principal Analyst for Sapient Insights Group. Cliff, welcome back to a very hot, boiling set of teas today. I mean, I've got my fan out. I've got fans behind me. It's like 97 degrees here in North Carolina. I don't know what it is in Florida.
Yeah, I like that you have the fans. You're going with more of the drag originating, spilling the tea
That's
sort of
right.
look, whereas I went with the very literal, even with that owl mug.
Yeah, I'm doing my fangirl. Yeah,
That's the last you'll be seeing the hot tea. I did that just for the prop, and it's hot here. It's hot everywhere. We'll be talking about it later. I was just in Minneapolis. And it was 98 there, so about 35 for foreign friends.
Yeah, I have a friend. We're talking to one of our clients who was out in the UK, and I couldn't believe we were comparing Fahrenheit and Celsius and the whole bit and what the numbers were. And when we got done, we're like, it's the same temperature in London as it is in North Carolina. I'm like, that is not even reasonable. So yeah. I hope everybody's staying cool. With that being the note, Cliff, we've got a lot going on. Do you want to talk a little bit about, we just closed the survey, right? So that's probably the biggest news for us, right?
Yeah. And although, every year at HR Tech, we do the big reveal. So without spoiling that, because you definitely want to see that, I don't think, in all the time it's been going, you've never gone through it and one goes, yeah, that's what I expected. There's always surprises. There's always just groundbreaking things that, you can trust because it's like this large data set. Well, I'll tell you, this is the largest we ever had. I'm not going to get into the exact numbers, but if you remember last year, we had over 10,000 people take it globally. I can tell you it's bigger than that. By, we'll just say double-digit percentages possibly, and, more organizations, a lot of small businesses, which reflects the way the world works. Most businesses
where the market's at.
And we've got more in APAC than we ever had before. So really glad. I know that a few of you listen to the show, especially some of our Australian listeners. And so we really thank you for that. Going to be the biggest set yet, and we had the most questions. I know. Could be over 400 pages of report, I'll tell you that for free. Well, not for free, for about $2,000.
Things. We added compliance. We added more questions about AI. We added questions this year about how more like governance and implementation questions. So yeah, it's but every year I keep thinking like they're not going to want to know anymore, and somebody wants some other additional information, right? So Tammy, who runs our survey, she did tell me she had one person who sent her a very not so nice email about how long the survey was. Everyone else, I think people have gotten to know us and they now understand, and they're like, we know we can take segments and sections, but it is what I really like is that every year we get to see how this kind of plays out across all the application areas. And so it's going to be a good data set this year. That's all I got to say.
Really looking forward to that. And as I was mentioning too, I was just recently up in Minneapolis for the Learn event. That's LEHRN, Leading Edge Human Resource Network, one of the older and probably really the first truly HRS begun groups. Your friend Matt, in fact.
Matt is one of my favorite event planners. He's no longer in the business. He was there just, I think, as someone who had done this in the past. Correct, right?
Yeah, and we were kind of informally honoring him as the founder. We didn't know if he would be able to stop by. I introduced myself because I'd never met him in person before, and he immediately asked me if I knew Stacey. And I was like, yes, I do. And then he told me he spilled the tea. He had all sorts of stories. I heard
He
about a
did.
walker with ice skates. Uh, so really great, wonderful organization. Now, strangely enough, as we were saying, it was hot up there. It was even in Minneapolis, it was 98 degrees.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop what was really an exciting group. And they did this whole theme. And I want to shout out a couple people, of course, Marilyn Pearson Hendricks, who is taken over, and Matt Stead as the person sort of running this and setting everything up. Harbinger Group and some of the other sponsors that were there. Yisel Venture was there, ADP Workday, and of course Paylocity. And I was there in the Paylocity room as they did this thematic work. And I want to also say hi to Lisa Tullochson, who was there representing at Paylocity. They said, what is something you learned that you didn't know that you needed to know? And as we went through and people sort of did this round robins around different tables and different rooms and different presentations, they all wrote down their thoughts throughout the day. And then at the end of the day, we had all of those compiled, little AI work, right? I put that all in, and then all of us that were doing these talks sat at the top of the room and answered questions based on sort of the conglomeration of all of those that were written in, and reflected on the statements of what people thought or what they needed to know. And a lot of it, although of course we're talking about AI and compliance issues, skills was a big thing. Dealing with recalcitrant managers or employees, even though AI is a topic that's not really, AI is not the problem. It's how people are using it or the sort of directives. So it always comes down to people, right? That's really what HR practitioners are dealing with. It's kind of what the H stands for, right? And I found that kind of fascinating. So, one of the big takeaways is that people have shifted from seeing AI as, a tool. Rather, it's not the answer in and of itself. It's just a tool to get to the answer.
Yeah, which is good to see, which is very good to see. It's interesting that so Learn is one of those organizations that was sort of there for a while. COVID is what really it kind of kiboshed it, and it's kind of coming back again. And it always has been a nice thing because Minneapolis has such a great audience of people who are in the midst of sort of HR technology decisions. What were some of the big topics they talked at the tables that you were talking through with them?
Well, I was just in my room, so
Yeah. I know, just in your room, yeah.
Yeah. Well, interesting. So I did give them a little bit. Again, Tammy Smith, don't attack me, but I did give them a little bit of a preview of some of the data that was coming through. They wanted to know how much is AI actually replacing people that we're working with, and that's actually a question that we ask.
Yeah.
And we have been asking, so we can kind of see where that movement's coming from. And a lot of their questions had to do, are we seeing this more in certain industries? Is there task related? And it's not surprising. Yes, certain industries are being more affected, right? Because if they have sort of task-related jobs or jobs that can be broken down into things that can be done with agentic or automated models, then yes, those are being affected. But not so much in job replacement. And we're going to be talking about that a little later too. But more in job changes and some restructuring, which is also some of what we saw when we did see some changes to workforce. It actually comes down to restructuring. So you could say that AI is having an effect there, but it's often not as direct of an effect. I guess that's sort of the thematic thing, is that over the last few years, AI has gone from being the sort of, number one, let's all sort of adjust around that, to AI sort of adjusting around us. We've got to do the work. Let's figure out where you fit AI rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, Cliff, thank you for going. I was very glad. I got to stay home most of July. I've got one trip down to visit my friends at Cornerstone to prep for their event that I'm going to be doing in Chicago in October for them, which is the first week in October. I'll be doing a keynote there. We did just record our cornerstone webinar with Tim Crawford,
Yes.
who from Avon, who is basically an IT analyst. And so we kind of took IT and HR, and we talked about why workforce readiness is now becoming an enterprise conversation. And so that was really an interesting conversation. We got into some really big topics like pricing issues, which we know are a big conversation right now. We got into what is elements of governance. We got into who should own the AI strategy. Me and him have a little different perspective on that. So that was fun. So that's webinar should be out on demand now because we just did that last week. And I know we have a couple of other webinars, Cliff. Workday, we did a workforce management webinar that should be on demand, and people should be able to see that, focusing on what we're talking about in the sort of frontline worker environments. And I know, as you had mentioned, we have the HiBob APAC webinar, but it's fairly quiet a little bit. It's July. This is the time when we get to look at data and get to play with data a little bit more, right? So I don't think we have any other trips coming up until September at this point, right?
That's right. I think we'll have a few, and we'll talk about where we're going to be at the end of that. But for the next month or two, you and I are going to do what data analysts have been doing since long before AI, long before any other time. We're going to be in a dark room with a screen lighting our faces,
Yes.
moving things from one cell to another and thinking about what it all means. But this is the most exciting time to be doing that. And I was glad to kind of have that one last hurrah of meeting everyone. And I also forgot I should shout out Sumit Kulkarni over at Prism Force, who hosted us for dinner. Which got a little unruly, I would say, in terms of
unruly with HR people. No,
yeah,
no
I know,
way.
right? Who would have ever guessed? Only anyone that's ever dealt with them. But it was a lively group and really good conversations, and I really those kind of things, especially when there's a lot of practitioners there, really helps guide our research. So I want to thank all the attendees, and those sort of thoughts and what you all were running into really helps guide how we start thinking about what do these numbers mean, because they're not just in a vacuum, right? We've got this massive data set, but now it's time to really think about how that all fits in, because for some of these companies like Paylocity that we mentioned, they are making big decisions based on this sort of stuff. In fact, they just acquired an AI company, the second of the year, I believe. So Paylocity acquired Aidora, that's AI, but it's not on its own. I know it's going to be weird, but it's Aidora. So most of these companies, you think there's an AI in there and it's like somehow supposed to be set on its own, but it's Aidora. And they are a leave management platform. So Paylocity continuing to build out, moving really into this AI native space. And what makes Aidora pretty interesting is they do leave management, which, Stacey, you've talked about before, is people unless they've done the job, they don't realize just how technical and how much of a pain that can be. So they use natural language processing so the employees can say, hey, I'd like to take some time off, right? And rather than having to navigate, just in their own natural language, just like that, was there any possibility of me getting time off in August? And then it's able to parse that the way that, these natural language processing tools can do, and look through your own company policies along with the laws and things from that area, and help get you that answer all within the Paylocity platform once it's fully integrated.
Yeah. And I think that, the conversation a lot of times we talk about is that leave management splits between sort of benefits management to some extent and time management, because it's you need both of that information. You know what the organization, you need to know what the compliance is, like we said. So Paylocity jumping into this in a way where they won't have to have as many partners, and there's a lot of partners in this model, right?
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see that, because this data is critical to a lot of the conversations we're seeing in the time management space and the workforce management space. So yeah, I think that's going to be the real conversation we see, is how much do these solutions have to start bringing in-house that data to be able to do the kind of intelligence that you need to be able to make to help the employees make decisions and to help the businesses drive the outcomes that they're looking for, right?
Exactly. And, you mentioned bringing in that data. I'd say that was a large part of what led to this next M&A story. And interesting, this is more in the M than the A.
Yeah.
We often talk about acquisitions, but this is a merger, and this is between Engagedly and Energage. I have to assume they saw each other in the phone book. This joke only works if you're over 40, by the way.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, there we are right next to each other in the business pages. Let's just do it. Everyone else going, what the hell is he talking about? So
phone book. They have maybe the alphabetical phone listed.
Yeah.
Right?
What's he on about? Engagedly, I do this is a bit of an aside, but I'm sure all millennials are so sick of this. We're always like, you've never heard of this? Like, we know what a rotary phone is.
Well, yeah, but my granddaughter doesn't, so I'll tell you that.
Okay, well, is she a big listener?
Not yet.
Engagedly, hi, Stacey's granddaughter.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Or viewing. You can also see us on YouTube, like and subscribe.
You might watch it on YouTube. YouTube is definitely her thing. Yeah.
Millennials know that one. So Engagedly, you might know, they are a full talent management platform. Energage, on the other hand, you could think of them as data in a way, right? It's a lot of research. A lot of that comes through employee voices, through surveying, although they do their in-house research as well. So they've been around for quite a long time, over 20 years of collecting all of this data, right? So not only does by joining forces, do this new group have access to all the tools and the front-facing software that you see through Engagedly, but now with a rich set of data to help inform any AI-driven decisions going forward, because anyone that's been paying attention knows that these systems are only as good as their data. Right. So it's very interesting. It was an interesting segue from what you just talked about, right? That's really what organizations are looking for. Yeah, we need the tech, but more than anything else, for this tech to work in an AI-driven platform, we need to have the data.
Yeah. And Engagedly, we've worked with, not worked with per se, but we've done briefings with them for several years. They're one of the many distributors in our distribution group. They always get fairly good ratings, but they don't have a huge customer base, right? Like, it's kind of a very specific group that kind of follows the work they're doing. So I think this is probably not only capabilities and connecting data sets, but also connecting to customer bases that will probably be good for both of them in this market right now. We do know, we can just basically, just by reading the tea leaves, if you want to call it that, tell you that it's going to be a rough couple of years for point solutions in general, because we do know that the drive for the AI conversation is also driving much of the centralization conversation. So the more you can kind of connect the dots before you get into that sales call, the better for many of these vendors. And for the buyers as well, to be honest, because they don't have to think about it as much, right?
Absolutely. So, those were the sort of the M&A activity. But this is not a merger. This is just a strategic partnership. But this one was very interesting. This is from our friends at HiBob. They are now working with SLICE, Global Equity.
Yeah.
So this one, you flagged it immediately, Stacey. You're like, now this is interesting, because for the last few years, we have seen this more and more, right? HR sort of being involved in IT and finance, probably the two most common areas of systems that we're seeing this connection that we keep talking about, combination of data. And that sort of combination is exactly what HiBob sort of highlighted during this sort of press release, and talking about that is being able to bring in the data from not just employee data, but bring in financial data, equity management, tax, governance data.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. You can have that all in one place. Think about the decisions you can make when you're thinking about your business as a whole. We talk about strategic HR, and that means helping the business grow. And that doesn't mean just in its people. It's, a tool to help you grow as a business. So really fascinating work.
We should note that HiBob did acquire not too long ago a financial planning technology, right? So they've got the financial planning component to what they're doing. And it's interesting because, you're not seeing someone like HiBob's like do a bunch of sort of like just the big sort of feature functionality kind of conversations that we're seeing and that we've seen for a long time in the HR market. But they're strategically, I think, thinking about like, what is it that a business needs to see connected on some level, right? And I think particularly if they're a global business, like this is, equity conversations are very global. And it's definitely an important conversation on the finance level, right? So I'm actually excited to see this. And I know there's been a lot of conversations on If I'm a small business or even a mid-market business, do I need a full ERP, or do I just need a few of these systems to have better bridges to each other, right? And that, I think, is really the conversation we're seeing. And can AI help create those bridges as long as I've got a good partnership, right? This gets back to our cluster model, right? So if your HRMS is one of your primary anchor systems, then, someone like a HiBob having a strong relationship with someone like Slice already with two-way data connectivity. And I don't know, they didn't particularly say if there was going to be two-way data connectivity here, but if they have that built into the conversation, then that makes that
Yeah, that's right. And referring back to that Learn event I was at, that cluster model really resonated. I had brought that up in a few of the presentations I had done, and I had a few people mention that that was specifically how they were being told or were directing their organizations to start building out their systems. So it's always interesting. We talk about things that are new when we presented HR Tech, and it's funny to see that go from, oh, wow, I've never heard of that before, but like, yep, that is what we are doing. In fact, that is actually driving our
Yes.
conversation. I should also mention that HiBob gave us, and we can't talk too much about some of the newer things that they're putting into the system, but they did give us a bit of a preview on some of their new AI capabilities. One that is already out is the ability to do some of their TA capabilities, some of their talent acquisition, recruiting capabilities, especially when it comes to resume parsing and helping sort of sort and view resumes, all with a very strong eye towards the governance and legality of doing so, right? No one gets caught. It's just like, let us help you sort of understand and not filter anything out, but say, hey, here are the ones that seem to have the most matching of the terms you're looking for. Here are the ones that have the least, but take a look at all of them, So it's kind of interesting to see, again, that movement away from like, hey, we're going to do the work for you, to AI being seen as a tool to help you do work.
Yeah, I think the term they used is that they have the glass box, not the black box, right? Wasn't
That's
that
right.
it, right?
I love that. I meant to say I was going to bring that up. The glass box
which
is a great
I
approach.
like that. We've heard a little bit of it elsewhere somewhere, but I haven't heard anybody really use it in HR as much. I've heard it used in some other markets, but I do think that the more visibility and the configuration is what they were really highlighting. The more visibility you give in that configuration is the power of what we're seeing in a lot of these organizations, and it gets back to what we see in our data over and over again for the HRMS. The number one thing that buyers want more of is the ability to tailor and configure to my unique needs in the organization. And so the more they can add that capability in any HRMS, I think the better they're going to be, based on our data at least, right?
That's right. Another thing that is very powerful, as we talk about these tools, never discount the power of friendship. No reason I'm bringing that up, but anyway, Oracle won a $395.8 million Office of Personnel Management contract with the United States government. The OPM, Office of Personnel Management, for any of our foreign listeners, that is basically the United States government's HR department. That personnel is, again, all the older people listening know that was the term for HR back in the day, and it's still used now. So if you remember, this was Workday originally had that as a no bid. People weren't happy about how that seemed to go around our normal structure of doing these things.
Back. Yep.
And so now it has gone to Oracle.
With a no bid conversation. Yeah, right. I know you're biting your tongue there.
I am waiting for ice to come down my door.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, again, this is huge. This will be a generation level decision. I know that sounds kind of odd when you think about technology, that it's, but when you think about these big systems, the past system that they're replacing in many cases is homegrown, home developed, right? Like they were green screen systems, right? In many of these environments, and so this is a big win, and it will be a big contract. It is, there is always the conversation about, well, if which devil do I go with, right, in this particular conversation, right? Which one would have been the better option? And I don't know the answer to that. We don't take any sides on this conversation. But what I do think is that, I'm never a fan of not getting an opportunity to do a real live RFP, particularly for something that's going to have this big of an impact on this many people in an organization. So that's my 2 cents on it. But on the other hand, I will say that, Oracle has invested heavily in their relationships with this space, right? And with their Oracle cloud environment, I think that's part of what makes this very interesting to, because where you keep your data and how you keep your data is going to be a big conversation for the OPM, right?
Yeah, and we should mention it will be the Fusion, Oracle Fusion Cloud.
Yeah, it'll be the Fusion
specifically that they're going to be doing. So pretty interesting, which is a very AI foundational system. So if nothing else, there'll be some modernization and some consolidation of, I think it was said that there were over 100 different systems before. So
we should note the target. Did you note the target launch date was July 4th, 2027, like literally a year from now, right? Like,
right.
Put a pin in it, guys. Let's see if we actually hit that, right? That'll be.
I wonder who is in charge of the implementation. Who got the implementation contract?
Yeah, well, that'll be the next question. Yeah. All right.
I don't know that, by the way. That's conjecture.
Conjecture, yes. All right.
That one we're not spilling any tea on.
We're really in trouble on the tea. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing we can smell some very, very tasty positive tea. In fact, I was having this was a rum raisin biscotti black tea. This was delicious.
Very good. My chai, original chai which by the way, I should say I'm still drinking and I love it, which was sent to me by Pragya, who is COO
over at UKG.
Over at iSolved, right?
iSolved, sorry, yes.
Yeah, at iSolved, but she used to work at UKG, so there's a connection there. Because, and I'll just tell you, anybody wants to get to the center of my heart, it is send me good tea. I love my tea. So yeah, it's one of those very, very favorite teas. Sounds like
we got you flowers or plants for your birthday.
Yeah, I know. My flowers are pretty on my deck. I do like my tea though. Yeah. All right, Jerry Johnson at UKG.
So Jerry Johnson, speaking of UKG, that's where it is stepping forward, and she will now be the Director of Product Management, leading workforce planning and operations. So very exciting. Working with Amy Brar and Suresh Vittal, at least that's who shouted out for their leadership. So pretty cool. We love to see people kind of moving up. UKG, I think that's one of the companies we've highlighted over the last few episodes. iSolved, UKG, and Workday have seen a lot of movement of people in, out, and when that happens, that also leaves a lot of opportunities for people to move up, right? And so it's interesting to watch. And there's certain times we like to highlight people here because we know that you're probably going to be hearing their name again.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, the conversation here about workforce planning is really. We just had this conversation, workforce readiness, workforce planning, all that's tying together. And I think you're going to see some continued improvements across every organization in this. And so it's a good place for Jerry to be, and looking forward to seeing what more we'll hear from that, right?
Yeah. We also have, as we mentioned, people going in and out. Chris Kabarian has left Lightcast and is now going to be the CEO of subscription services at International SOS. So pretty interesting movement around there. I didn't realize how big International SOS was. There are 13,000 employees there at ISOS. So pretty cool. They do security. I think they call it duty of care. So, you got your medical, security, logistics, that type of thing. So, which kind of makes sense for a company called SOS, right? It's probably like how a lot of the payroll companies have pay in their name. So, pretty neat, but pretty interesting move. But it starts to make a little sense too when you think about the types of security and privacy and logistics. As we've mentioned, HR really does fit naturally into some of these when you think about data, and as far as we're seeing now, entire systems too, right? So
Well, and I think it also it's important to note that things like healthcare, like the impact of global warming, as we sit here and sweat our hands, um, uh, those are things that are large scale conversations right now,
yes,
big issues, right? And there's very few places where you get that kind of experience of dealing with that big set of data, that big set of environment in a business world. Because as much as we love to talk about big data and finances and all that stuff, a lot of that's actually very small data sets and very small because industries and the new numbers and the total number of companies over 1,000 is, much smaller than most people think, right? But the one place you get that kind of experience working with that kind of data is workforce data. It's the one thing that just is bigger than anything else. And so I think, like Cast with the long experience of that kind of understanding of the value and the impact of that data and what that size of data and what it can do. It's interesting to see where he's heading. That's another place where data plays a huge impact on what's going to happen there, right? So yeah, not surprised. It's an interesting move, right?
yeah, it's a wonderful point. It reminds me of yeah, longtime listeners may know that I used to own an arcade bar. I sold it a year ago. Shout out to Rob Leonard, he's doing a wonderful job running it. But you know, it it was both of our first times owning a company, and now we had physical assets, right? We had arcade machines or pinball machines, right? And in the sort of data that we kept on those, right, you'd have a few things like, its value, any records in terms of what you put into it. You'd keep some records on any maintenance and cost, maybe even something like weight or size. One employee, you're talking about literal hundreds of fields, everything
Yeah.
from their address to any of their medical history. I mean, the second they start, they had more fields than any other thing that we had in our entire business.
Interesting.
One
Yeah.
employee all of a sudden quadruples the amount of data that you have to keep track of. And a lot of that, you legally have to keep track of it. So it is fascinating to think about how much that exponentially changes basically the setup and the account.
Yeah, that's actually real. We're going to be talking a lot more, I think, about the very small companies. That is a big conversation in the HR market. We're seeing them more of the very small companies need HR, to your point, and to the technology. We've definitely seen in the like 10 and above, like that market rapidly ramp up. But the like 1 to 5 employees, 1 to 9 employees, right? That range there. Lots of space kind of managed and sort of hit by sort of the gustos and the paychecks and the ADP earlys and their role insure products, right, and all that. But that audience right now is being inundated with a lot of options of AI based HR management, which is a good way to put it, right? 'Cause it seems like an easy place to start. We'll see how that goes because, to your point, it is more complex than most think, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
And it requires quite a bit of regulation,
Yeah.
which is what makes this next story a little concerning, which was a recent United States Supreme Court, stripping the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, from being an independent agency to one that now has presidential executive branch oversight. So that will have a large scale, or at least a long-term effect, if it stands, for AI regulation, because that is who that would normally have fallen under. It still would have fallen under the FTC. AI regulation would normally follow the FTC, but now that means that we see things like, I don't know, for instance, if there was an entire AI platform and the decision was made to go with that platform instead of a different one, is that the executive's choice, and who has the regulatory insight on that? So,
Yeah. Well, and the challenge on all this, again, politics aside on all of it, right, is that um trust in an environment, trust in the fairness as much as you can get. We all know that there's a thumb on the scale in almost everything that we do in the business market, right? Um, but that trust is what allows I think business to function above board on an everyday basis in a way in which you can have some idea that you're not going to get monopolies that are going to basically make it impossible for very small organizations to sort of break through. Now, there's always cases where that becomes a big situation or a big issue, right? And it doesn't work out always as much as we want it to. But the FTC was one of those levers that kept, I would say, trust and an understanding of sort of there's balance, at least in the system and the environment for you. And so we are going to have to, as business leaders, continue to kind of monitor, as if trust erodes in just our pure simple processes of how our economic decisions are being made. Do we start to have to rethink the idea? Will any of our data about how business modeling gets done be accurate? Will any of our data about how employees need to be sort of assessed inside organizations be accurate? These kind of sort of standards that we've had for years and years and years, it's not just about sort of what you can and can't do now today. It's also about sort of the data that has been in place that based the models and the business decisions off of this kind of stability, right, that we might be losing in the market. And so how do you start to predict a very unstable environment? That was a conversation that was basically the heart of the conversation that Tim and I had on the Cornerstone webinar, which is, workforce readiness seems like an easier conversation in a very stable environment. It's a much more difficult conversation in an unstable economic, social and or global environment, which is really where we're at right now. And so for business leaders all over the place, these kind of big swings might do well for one business or another, but they have an impact on the stability of what we can sort of bet on as we're making decisions, right?
Yeah. And we should mention, too, that this has global impact. One of the articles that you had sent, Stacey, actually highlights the fact that the EU has long had the EU-US data privacy framework, which they've already been asked to withdraw it already because they want to challenge it. Because what happens is it generally just goes along with FTC. Right, and agrees in FTC. So that will have repercussions in Brussels for the EU because if they no longer trust the FTC's decisions to be objective and to have that trust level, they will start having their own sort of independent rather than us being sort of locked together in the way we oversee things like using AI for hiring. And for pricing models, which we're going to be talking about a lot, I think, come around HR Tech. That's one of those questions that we asked on is we've talked about on this podcast before. We're going to see, what is the legal framework around that. So we will. That's another one I would say to put a pin in that one, Stacey, and we will see what kind of what we learned from that.
We'll bring you more news on it because I think all the business leaders. It's going to have an impact on the amount of compliance we have to keep our eyes on. I know that's like you're kind of like, oh well, it's actually less regulations. No, actually, now it's going to create a disparate set of regulations across different areas. And I know already. I just talked to someone on the compliance conversation this week, and they're like, yeah, I got to go down to the metro level to understand compliance regulations right now. Metro, like city level, for compliance regulations. Now, granted, we are talking about some of that being centralized at a country and region level, but I don't think that's happening anytime fast, and stuff like this makes that harder, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Now you got to keep track of all that, and you might have to worry about whether someone in your work is secretly taping you through their the Meta / Ray-Ban glasses that have recordings on this. Strangely enough, Stacey, you probably didn't notice, but I've actually ran into this. Someone that I will not name in one of our events, one of the other analysts at one of the events had these on. And can you, Stacey, I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to allow you to. Can you tell me what the nickname for these glasses that record people is?
So Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses have earned the title of pervert goggles.
Pervert goggles. And so this gentleman wearing the pervert goggles, I'm sure you would not like that. I will say it was a gentleman, so you can narrow it down somewhat. So they are meant to have a light on when they're recording.
Yes.
But there are videos abound that tell you how to stop that. Anything from just black tape to getting into the software. there's a lot of things that are shown to us that we're told, don't record this. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll say, I'm just taking pictures for my own use. And they're like, okay, but, they were kind of getting called out for like, you can't wear those. I'm sorry. Like that is,
Well,
we
so
can't
much of what
trust it.
so much of what we do is under NDA. And then we just had this whole conversation, right? Like, is that any different than someone who turns on granola or some other recording device on your phone? There are laws about what you can and can't use. Those laws have not caught up yet at all with any of this. But I will say this particular conversation that I sent out, right? Is that this is really about facial recognition as
Yeah.
well, right? Like the idea here is that it's not just that the glasses are on and they're recording everything. It's that that it is now recognizing the person in front of you based off of either their LinkedIn profile or their Facebook profile, whatever is public available. And that's a huge compliance risk for people inside of companies, right? So that's one conversation. And a very big risk for anybody who has maybe moved towns because they had someone who was at risk of harassing them, right?
Yes.
Or who's left a dangerous relationship, right? And just right. So there's some real issues here that is both an employer issue and a just personal safety issue. But the employers here are really going to have to, I think, have some conversations about this. All wearables become an issue. Like now they've got, I think, the OpenAI is now talking about, that was the whole, I don't know if we've got the story in here, but that they're suing,
Yes.
that Apple's suing them for basically stealing some of their trade secrets because they have all these employees who went over there who were from the Apple hardware side of this business. But the idea is that they're not creating phones per se, but they're creating hardware that will listen constantly, right? And so we are going to have the regulations are going to have to get caught up on this. But as an employer and as a vendor working in this space, you are going to have to take some stances because the regulations won't get there fast enough, right?
That's right. You do have to kind of get ahead and think
Yeah.
about implications because, as they said, not everyone making the policies understands all of the different implications. So you said if they've never really gone through that system, might not know or think about the possibilities of spousal or partner abuse and harassment. But, they may not even think about things like, people change the names for any sort of reasons, right? It shows up. And what's interesting, that is the feature that's most being marketed. It's like, oh, we'll help you remember someone's name.
Which I get completely. I am anybody who knows me knows. I will meet you, and 5 minutes later I'll be like, I know you just told me your name. I know who you are. I have the story you told me about your childhood in my head. I can't remember your name. So I get the desire for it. It's just scary, right? Like especially when you can't opt out of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it leads into this next conversation on
Yes.
Meta, right? Which is the class action lawsuit, which again is over child safety. And this is a $1.4 trillion class action
Yeah.
lawsuit put by 4 states who are seeking against Meta. So Meta's definitely had a very, very, very bad couple of weeks, right? Not always because I think I even called them out this based off of some stuff that they were doing to their employees from their layoff conversation. But this particular conversation is based off the fact that Meta is going to be held accountable if they win this lawsuit, if this lawsuit gets won, to knowing and actively sort of creating a technology that they knew would have harm on children's mindsets, right? So this is one of the first times that we are going to see a technology, not the content on it, but a technology being held responsible for the outcome to a human being. And particularly in this case, it is the addictive experience that particularly children have when it comes to something like social media, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot, and this will have big repercussions for the largest of the chatbot providers, the AI chatbot providers, your OpenAIs and your Claudes and stuff, because there's been multiple cases of their tools directly leading to self-harm and suicide. So, which just got us kicked off YouTube.
Yeah.
I know there's a term you're supposed
Yes.
to use instead. But Yeah, so that is definitely one to watch. Almost certainly with these class action suits, this will result in something happening beforehand, but that will mean that we will have some regulatory changes one way or the
It'll
other,
set a precedent,
self-regulatory or
right?
not.
When you set the precedents, right? And again, we know precedents sometimes don't get looked at as tightly, but in this particular case, for the longest time, now this is starting to be held differently, but for the longest time, I can't tell you how many CEOs stood up and said, we are not accountable for the decisions people make on the data that's on these technologies. That's their data, their decisions, their actions. We just provide the platform. I can name every CEO, major CEO in the market who stood up and stood that from a cloud-based perspective anytime these conversations came up. And for a long time, the FTC and other organizations that were accountable, EEOC, other organizations that were accountable to this kind of held that line and agreed that was how the internet grew to some extent as fast as it did, was because no one was terribly held accountable for what was on their platform. They were really the only person who actually created the content was held accountable for it, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
if we were lucky. In this particular case, we're starting to say that the tech and the content are merging, as it often does with AI, and algorithms and decisions about what you see and being put in front of you. And this is going to have an impact on, just take, for example, I'm a candidate and I'm starting to see job offers, and I'm only a female. I'm only seeing job offers that are $70,000 instead of $150,000. Now,
Uh-huh.
all of a sudden, you are making a decision based off of who I am and what you see and where I live and all that about the type of job offers I'm seeing, because it's tailored towards me. And they're all lower paying job offers, right? So that kind of thing, now you as whoever is doing that algorithm is going to be held accountable for that.
That's right.
That's scary, right?
Exactly. And that's kind of what one of the examples we were talking about that would normally be covered, at least in the United States, by the FTC, and why you want that independent to really think about algorithmic based pricing or algorithmic
Yeah.
based job offers. So, yeah, this case, regardless of how it's resolved, will have repercussions one way or the other. And I hope it isn't just uh, a payout to make it go away and we
Let's
don't see
go
anything
in.
else. But
Yeah.
uh, because of what's interesting and is because of the massive investments um, that Meta has made and still is in debt for, they probably don't have that leeway to strong arm this one like they would have. So
Oh,
this will be
well,
very interesting. This may
we will
be
see. That's a good
the
point. And
way just
you follow that a little bit more closely than I do, Cliff. So right. Like a lot of times the money makes it go away. One company that has a lot of that cash just sitting around is Apple. They haven't done quite as much AI investment, I think, right? But so they're going to use their heft to do some lawsuits, I think, right?
Yeah, as you mentioned, they are suing OpenAI for trade secret theft. They have apparently over 400 former employees have gone from Apple over to OpenAI.
That
Uh,
blew my mind. I was like, not only that you know that, the number and where they went, and that's a lot of employees to go over to one place,
yeah.
right?
And they have some very specifics. It's not just that there's
Yeah.
a lot of people there. They have some very specific employees that are named. They have an example of someone who had brought their laptop and never, from Apple and had never brought it back. Always return your equipment, our younger listeners.
Yes.
You don't want to
Always
get
return your equipment and make sure you get it secured appropriately. I know when that was one of my first lessons as a young employee. I was like, I just want to get my personal data off there. A lot of times that's not allowed. Those things you're kind of, your hands are tied onto what's in your work laptop,
In
right?
fact, I think it was earlier this year, we were talking about different ways that HR systems
Yeah.
are starting to merge, and one of those things is in provisioning. That
Yeah.
is what provisioning is.
It's
So in case you're
all
like, what
about.
does that term mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
where's my dang laptop? And get that laptop back.
Yes.
That's why HR is starting to say, maybe we need to be involved in this, or at least
Yeah.
the systems do. Maybe the people themselves don't. But yeah, so that'll be pretty interesting. As we were talking about before, you know, we promised we were going to touch on this, which is the pricing thing. I find this conversation fascinating, and I know a lot of people I was talking to this week do as well. Really great article from Tim Crawford, who you
Yeah. Who's our
mentioned
good
earlier,
friend from Avoya. Yeah.
talking about how token-based pricing is kind of just really analyzing I think the way it is this the right model for enterprises? And we've already talked a few times about how the immediate sort of backlash to token-based pricing has been swift, and it has not been positive. And what is really, and this is kind of what Tim's getting at too, which I 100% agree with, is that the problem is the unpredictable nature of it. It's not that the costs have gone up. People can live with that. They don't like it, but the costs go up is an understood thing. Not knowing what the cost is going to be is not how budgets work in the business world. Remember your OpenAI's, I should say your ChatGPTs, the things you're actually using, Claude and ChatGPT, they came from the consumer world. They went to us as individuals first. And we as consumers are very familiar with that. We have certain things, our electric bill being one of them. The more you use it, the more it is. We all fundamentally understand that. That is not how businesses are structured. You ask for a budget long before you ever spend it. You got to get a general idea what that budget is. And you don't want to be too far. If you don't want to overguess, you don't want to underguess either, right? For hopefully obvious reasons, but you want to try and get it just right. So unpredictable spending models just don't work in the business world. And it's that unpredictable nature that is causing fits for some of these systems that rely on usage, right? So everyone's sort of tying themselves in knots trying to find this sort of blend model that we've seen quite a bit, this hybrid model where you've got a certain amount, and if you go over, then you go in. We've seen outcome-based pricing, which I found many people aren't familiar with. Just in case you're new, that's basically if you were using one of these AI tools, they would look at how using that tool affected a better outcome based on not using the tool, right? The easiest example is hiring. You had this many open recs, this many jobs you need to hire for, and you didn't use that tool. Now that you have used that tool, we see you did 20% more hires and 20% faster. Therefore, we can charge you this much because we know we made you this much money. So anyway, that's kind of what Tim's getting at, but you had a chance to talk to him. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here that, at this point right now, one, we have to be very aware that no matter, even as the prices go up, the market's still being heavily subsidized, right? So there is going to be a big price tag that's coming down the road, even as we're using more, right? And his perspective, I think my perspective a little bit is that these big providers, particularly the enterprise-based conversations, is they're going to have to make some judgment calls and kind of stick to them. Like, this is what we think you're going to spend. And if companies go over that, they might have to eat some of that. And that I know that's very uncomfortable and that's a very hard place to be at. But kind of like you said, if you sort of don't look at it that way, you're going to end up with customers who are going to be throttling their use, which is what happens, right? And we know that throttling use means I don't get value out of it, right? I know one of the things that we've seen also, the other model is not just the token model of how many characters, how much work does it do, right? Or the outcomes, which is what's the dashboard that it shows up all the time, right? But then maybe just the number of calls you make, right? Like, so that's the Workday's doing the API calls, those kind of things. And then the question becomes, well, what's my data? Do I have to pay to access my data? Well, if it's not a human accessing it, it's an AI accessing, what's the difference on that, right? And so, I think everybody's trying something different here. What I would say is that, the IT leaders, and we'll put a link to Tim's article in the
show notes.
Show notes. Thank you very much.
It's hot.
Tim started to mention in there, and he does a very good job, I think, defining everything. Starts to mention the idea of sort of offline or lower end model uses. We are going to start to see, I actually just got quoted an HRD article on this, which companies are using sort of those limited models, cheaper models to be able to avoid this cost thing on premise, right? Which was the conversation. I'm like, boy, I haven't heard that in a long time. We're going to do an on premise AI model. We are forcing people, because of the price of things, to not get the most out of AI, and more importantly, to really balance what's just a workflow, what actually might a human being be better at and be more cost effective at, and what do I really need to use AI for. But the risk we run, and I think we talked about this last time, is that if the AI is only seeing the top of the funnel or the most important conversations. It is all the other information that makes their answers the best they can be, because they see the whole picture at a much faster space than we do. So if they're being limited in what you're giving them, they're missing what's teaching them. And so it's a real risk we're running, right? Like, we're going to create really dumb AI that only can answer a few questions really fast, but it doesn't have the context. We are limiting its access to context. So it's a risk, right?
It will still tell you that you asked a really good question, though.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So we're going to do something we haven't done in the last few episodes. We're going to go into the speed round.
Yep.
As we're getting in here towards the top of the hour. Interestingly enough, we're going to talk a little bit about that HR article you wrote, or the HRE article you quoted, I should say. We're going to talk about how people are using AI, but we're also going to talk about how an organization is using AI. This is Costco. They made some news. They were in all sorts of Axios, The Street, a few others, talking about how they are using AI and in a way not using AI. They are not replacing workers. And in fact, they're not even using any of the tools. For instance, they highlight that they didn't use it for inventory management, something Starbucks was using it for, and then stopped when they found that the AI couldn't differentiate between different types of milk, which would be a big problem for anyone with allergies or intolerances or anything of that nature. Where they are using AI, though, so they are saying a wait and see approach. They've always been one of the highest paying in the space, and that sort of approach is working out. They're like us, right? The database. Let's see what's a proven practice. But they said they do use it for search engine optimization, something that we've seen some others for. So basically research, almost like what you just said, Stacey. Look through a whole bunch of data, figure out how are people searching for things, and let's help them, guide them, and help that to make sure that people are coming to them and making sure that their products are featured correctly and stuff like that. So pretty interesting. And it falls in line with what we've seen with Costco's strategies before, right?
It really does. It's another one of our examples of highlighting a good use and a good way of doing this, like we did with IKEA. We're going to continue to highlight those companies that are doing it right. So, yeah.
That's right. And we should also mention that we're also going to highlight the pricing model. That is one of the things that I briefly mentioned that will be in this year's report. We asked some very specific questions about how AI or how the tools are being priced, and we'll do some side-by-side comparisons so you can understand all that, because I know we've been kind of touching on it. I'm going to go in depth. It'll be in there, and we'll talk about which companies are doing which. Another thing we mentioned is how people are actually using AI. This is from David Green. Always very interesting. There's a good chart. We'll link to that. And it's very interesting, just 1 year, how people are using Gen AI has changed so much. It's gone from being things like finding purpose. That was number 3 last year. It's number 85 this year. Organizing my life has gone from 2 to 14. So number 1, though, is still therapy companionship. It'll say it was a good question. And things like troubleshooting, which was 16, is now number 2. So that's exactly the use case you mentioned, Stacey, right? Go through an already existing data set and find out where that problems are, what's different.
Where the problems are. That it is the best use, I think, right now that I've seen. I mean, there's a lot of other uses, but definitely the one that adds the most value to a lot of different lives. I do have to call out that jumping from number 7 last year to number 3 was fun and nonsense. That, not sure what that says about how people are using AI or the amount of energy they're spending on that. But hey, everybody gets their kicks some way.
Two that I also generating code professionally went from number 5 last year to 78 this year. People are going, no, it doesn't work. But the one that was troubling was going from 38 last year to number 7 this year is relationship advice. I now know why I'm not in a relationship. People are asking AI. I knew it was wrong. You thought I didn't like AI before.
We really
I need to use some of that Costco search engine optimization to make sure my name comes to the top. This one was kind of interesting because I want to be careful on how much of the data we give away. But this one's about a record labor shortage. Speaking of people not matching up. People are coming out of jobs, and we're looking to see a whole lot of, it looks like more than between 2024 and 2032. So basically, in this next 8 years we're in, 18 million college-educated workers will leave the labor force, while fewer than 14 million will enter it. So we're going to really run into this labor shortage. I am debating how much to give away, but I will say that, all right, how about this? Last year in our data, we predicted some pretty shocking things regards to who's going to be increasing their workforce and how much organization will be decreasing. Those predictions have been proven correct by this year's data set.
It has.
So
Okay.
if you have access to last year's report, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Yeah. It is. It's been interesting. This is a conversation I just cannot emphasize enough, that if you think your talent strategy will be to recruit people after 2026 and 2028 and 2029, heading into 2030, you will be dead wrong. There is no way to recruit your way out of an environment where there's not enough people to do the job. This is a development and a planning conversation. And so I'm just going to leave it at that. So recruiters are going to be in high demand, and recruiting tools are going to be in high demand, but we're not. I talked to someone the other day and I said, was the Great Resignation a dress rehearsal for what is to come, right? Because that was a time when we were seeing people switch jobs all over the place. They said that was the opportunity to shift from one job to another, but there was enough people to do the jobs. We are heading into a point where there will just not be enough people to do the job. So just leave it at that, especially if you want healthcare, right?
Yeah. I feel like we're on a sort of depressing kick, but this was PayScale's second quarter labor market report. We saw that the inflation rate went up is at 4.2%, but average wage growth is at 3.5, right?
Yeah,
so leaving most workers a 0.7 decline in real wages. However, there are certain tiers of talents, including number one, trades.
Yeah.
Called it. But also logistics, operations, and of course some AI stuff. Pretty fascinating. So technology saw wage growth at 6.9%, and government 4.5%. So pretty interesting. And how about this? Some good news for our friends in Las Vegas, where Stacey and I will be living during the month of October. We'll get to that in just a second. They had the fastest growing metro wage growth at nearly 5% at 4.7, beating Baltimore, Cleveland, represent, Detroit, and actually the Midwest in general seem to be doing much better.
Yeah, those of us in the South are basically just melting, and we're not doing any work at this point, right?
Yeah, and we should point out the PayScale's data comes from what employers are actually paying, right?
Yes.
Not these. This isn't surveyed. This is we know this is coming directly from the system. So pretty interesting. Now, I wanted to point out one last story because it was someone who was quoting. It was Arn Bloom who had mentioned basically a little breakdown of what Meta had been doing. $145 billion on a project. We talked about them losing out on the, what was the one they did before? The virtual reality thing.
Virtual reality. Yeah. The one that you told me to not put on the survey, and then I did. But yes, we did. Yes. The virtual reality did not pay off for them. They just dropped it. Yep.
Yeah. So, they were building all this stuff and it was just a total loss. Now, he quoted your article breaking that down too of what happened at Ada, but basically the conclusion you had made is when you accelerate badly engineered process with AI, things go wrong, right? It's the classic with AI. We talked about this way back in the day. Like if you've got a faster system and if you give it biased data, it just lets you be biased faster. That same sort of idea. Bad decisions lead
Our
to...
predictions have come true here. The funny thing is that this was based off of an interview with an HRD press. They interviewed me about the large language models and the smaller language models being utilized in place of the AI models. And then she said, "Could you have any comments on the Mark Zuckerberg conversation and his basically walk back of all the layoffs that they're not actually getting the most out of the agents that they are?" And I said, well, yeah, we could have told him that before he did all of this work. And I was like, oh, I call. And then she actually published it. I was like, oh, I should have maybe said that was off the record or something, right? Basically called out Mark Zuckerberg. I'm like, well, that I hadn't planned on doing that today, as getting Meta upset at Sapient Insights, but it was very real that we could tell you that sort of layoffs being done without HR and laying off your most experienced people, which we know now, anybody who's looked at the data can tell you that what AI does well is actually elevates the role of your most experienced people. It was doomed before you started, and so we will continue to see this happen because the stock market keeps rewarding it. And I wish I could give us a better answer on that one, Cliff, but we're not. And
I'm fully on the record because I'm recording. Oh, by the way, just for anyone that's, again, this one seems to be themed around our younger listeners and viewers. If you're dealing with the journalist, you say, I want this to be off the record. They agree, then you can say it. Yeah. I've seen a number of people say something and go, that's off the record. And it's like, nope, too late. That's not how it works.
Exactly.
Just days of journalism. So
there
just mark that down. You can't say something, go, oh, that's off the record. No, it's too late. Get sent back. But I'm going, my issue here was Arne Bloom's very first statement. He said, Mark Zuckerberg is undoubtedly smart. Nope, very much doubt that. One of the dumbest people out there, Elon Musk, is probably in the bottom 10% of intelligence worldwide. These people are phenomenally dumb. You could not imagine how stupid these people are. Having money has nothing to do with any of that. There's almost certainly a lack of morals, probably some sociopathy that's almost always associated there. But having money is not what success is. So stop thinking that these people are smart. They're not smart. Being in the right place, right time, or being born into money is almost always a great way to make money. The easiest way to make 10 million, start with 9 million. That's how you do it. So, no, these people are dumber than possible, and that's been proven. And that is why Stacey talks about proven practices, because if you just said what is successful, that's a best practice. Look, best practices, they spent $145 million. Look at 10 different companies are trying to make AI powered videos. That's a best practice. They're spending money on it and they're all doing it. Failed. It's not proven. It's not proven practice.
Got to have a proven practice. Yeah. If you're really going to want to, you can take some swings. We don't disagree with swings. Swings aren't a bad thing, but know that you're taking a swing and that there's a risk. I always tell people it's just like basically investing in companies, or if you are going to gamble, we don't recommend gambling, but you don't do it with any money you can't afford to lose, right? That's how you have to think about it when you're doing those big swings. So Cliff, this has been a kind of a somber, conversation. I'm like, we're an hour in and we're just like going deep.
I know. No, I can tell the heat's got me flustered. I'm saying all sorts of wild things. You know what we need to do? We need to go out and we got to do some events. That'll get our minds off this stuff. Where are we going to be? Where can we go have some fun and people come meet with us and chat?
Yeah. So we're not sure we're going to be there yet, but one of the first things we're talking about doing possibly in September is the NAPIO event, which is I think it's North America's, but I'm not sure.
North American
PEO organization. We've never done this one, so we're actually, if anybody knows someone who actually works the event, we've got some clients who want us to go there and talk about it. So we're Cliff. It's an hour north of where you're at, right, Cliff? Where
hour south, Marco Island, just down south of me. Wonderful place to see the burrowing owls.
Yeah.
And PEO is something that we've also focused on heavily on this year's report. Not to keep harping back to that, but it is very interesting because we've seen a lot of that growth coming in that area, and we'd like to know more. Plus, we like, again, talking to the people at the sort of smaller businesses that, as we said, is really driving a lot of the economy. Now, sort of the other side of the United States, later on in September, I'll be at the OC Tanner event. Always a really wonderful event. OC Tanner, one of the leaders in the rewards and recognition space. That'll be in Black Desert, Utah. Then Stacey, you'll be meeting us halfway, huh?
Halfway. I'll be in Chicago at the Cornerstone Connect keynote. October 6th, actually, getting into some of these, just a little bit of early findings because just a few weeks later we're going to be at the HR Tech conference. But very excited to be able to do that. Minnie, who's over there, who's their head of marketing, and Jennifer and Randy, the whole team.
Graham,
love that group for just their sheer sort of, I think, interest in increasing the conversations that people want to have. So that's always a good thing when you're doing that, when they're willing to kind of let you go where the data is going and not tell you what you have to talk about, right?
Yeah. That
And
kicks
then
off about a month of October for us. You want to walk through those?
yeah. So then we're going to be just in Las Vegas. So basically, October 12th through 15th, we're going to be at Workday Rising. Right now, it's myself. Cliff might also be joining us. That's going to be in Las Vegas. The week after that will be the HR Technology Conference in Las Vegas, October 9th, 24th. Cliff and I will definitely,
The whole
SIG team will be there. So just know you're going to get a chance to meet Allison and Tammy and Caitlin if you haven't had a chance to meet her, as well as
Carrie and Susan and
all of our whole team, right? Then we also know that there's 2 additional events the week after that. So we're still kind of having conversations. There's the Oracle AI World, as well as the Dayforce event, which is coming up that following week as well. And so we have 2 events. We're still deciding sort of how that's going to play out for everyone, but I believe both of them are going to be in Las Vegas. And that doesn't even get into November. We have lots in November, but we basically stopped at the end of October because at that point, me and Cliff will be exhausted. So, yeah.
Yeah, I will say too, probably the very first week of November, we normally try and do it around Halloween.
Yeah.
We're going to take everything that we talked about at the HR Tech event and do a virtual event for anyone that wasn't able to make it. So you won't get the debut of the data, but if you do want to kind of get those key findings and hear everything, kind of circle your calendars.
I always tell people, don't make that a reason not to go to the session, because at the session, I can say some things because it's behind closed doors a little bit, like, hey, this is something you should be aware of. When it comes to the recording, sometimes there's some things we can't share. So you do get a little bit of a different message on both of those events. So be aware of that.
Good point.
Yeah. Yeah. Outside that, Cliff, I think we are, we've taken up our full hour plus as usual, but we are going to wrap up today just because it's hot. Everybody hopefully is heading off to some cooler climes wherever you're at. As we wrap today, just a couple of other additional things. Like I said, make sure you're going to see us at the HR Tech Conference, October 19th and the 22nd. We have 2 sessions there, something to be aware of this year. We will be doing an HR Tech workshop intensive on clarifying the business case, making smarter technology decisions, and that will be a workshop style. I will be having running conversations. It's really going to be important. That's on Tuesday afternoon. Cliff, on Wednesday, you're going to be doing an Ask the Expert, right?
Yep.
Right before my session at 2:00. So Cliff will have an Ask the Expert.
Please come ask any questions. I have my computer with me.
Yeah.
We'll be able to get into some of the stuff. We've done this before. Come on, guys, you got to help me out. I always feel bad. Everyone wants to talk to Stacey. Make me look good.
This is it, guys. We're saying go visit Cliff. He will have his computer and he will have some data available if you want to dig into some of the data.
I'll be wearing bright pink. You cannot miss me.
You can't miss, yeah. Right after that, I will be debuting the annual HR System Survey's key findings. We have lots of good stuff there. That will be the keynote mega session on the afternoon of Wednesday. And then right after that, it's a good time to go out into the floor and visit all of those vendors that we're going to be talking about. Also, for all of your HR technology voice of the customer winners, we will be sending out notices for number 1s and top 5s in mid-August. So I know a lot of you are emailing us right now to like, when's the announcement's going to come out? We do that very carefully because we've got to make sure all of our data and our numbers are where they need to be at. So you will get that data. Kind of look for it around mid-August. If you haven't heard by mid-August, then you may not have made the list, and my apologies. If you are interested in getting your badges and getting some segment papers, just a reminder, and again, this is tough for me and Cliff because we're like, we just want to make we want to give everybody access to all the information, but there is a time limit on just how many we can do at a time. And we have a team that we are trying not to kill with the amount of work that we put on their plate. And so it is kind of a first come, first served basis and all that. So be aware that when you get your email out, don't sit on it because the longer you wait, the longer it takes for us to get your data back. And our team is not huge. And so we need to make sure we base all that out. Just a reminder, we're covering over 200 vendors in this year's report. It might be more than that, actually. We got to actually do it out because that was from last year's numbers. So it probably be closer to 300 or 400 this year. As Cliff said, we had more than 10,000 inputs and a little over 6,000 organizations. So we're very excited this year about where the data's at. Also, if you want to get all the details on where this will be at, how you can access everything, please sign up on our website, on our newsletter to get ongoing updates on our research launches where we'll be speaking, visiting, and when you can participate in the annual survey, which will be reopened again next spring. So this doesn't all go away. Be sure to listen to all of our shows on the HR Huddle podcast on Work Defined. If you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating and review where you grab your podcast. To stay up to date with immediate breaking HR tech news and get all the behind the scenes content, you can follow us at Sapient Insights on LinkedIn and Instagram. Cliff, as always, thank you for pulling all this together. I know it's a bit of work. We're figuring out faster ways to do it.
Yeah.
We've got new tools and new technology, so it's all working together. A thank you to our production team, including Kelly Kuhn, who's done an amazing job transitioning into the
Riverside for our auditing
product, right? Yeah. To Linda
Auditing?
Galloway, who's still continuing to do all of our copy and making sure the vendors are named correctly and all that thing. We really do appreciate that. It means a great deal to us. To our marketing team, Summer Alano, Cole Harris, Caitlin Diamond, who just make sure all this stuff gets to where it needs to be. It is important, especially including our YouTube uploads, those kind of things. And most important, thanks to our listeners and community. We couldn't do this without you. I know we keep saying, be sure to send us your information. We get lots of emails these days now on any announcement that people are doing. So we do appreciate all the emails that you are sending. And that's it for this episode of Spill the Tea on HR Tech. We hope it's been just the brew you needed to start the engines running this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another pot of, let's hope not as boiling hot, HR Tech updates and insights, because we don't want a little bit of cool weather coming. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone have a good week. Yep.
Iced tea time.
Yeah.